Episode 5: Stress, Threats, and Ultimatums.
Scene 7. Spiron is not a computer. There were times when Zara's disappearance seemed far away, as though it was not real. Then there were other times, at night, when his optimism abandoned him. He fretted over what could be done. He had access to vast resources, yet nothing had been uncovered. Nothing. Not a thread of garment, not a strand of hair, not a ticket or purchase or communication before, during, or since. Real disappearances looked, smelled, tasted different. This wasn't real. Deep in his gut, Banks knew that Zara was safe, alive. What would tomorrow bring? He drank to deal with it as best he could. Following Billy's suggestion, he went to visit 22, who stood before him, arms resting defiantly on his hips, dressed in his usual white lab coat.
"Look, I sympathize."
"Tell me what you know about Zara's disappearance."
"Philip, we have tried everything."
He scratched at his wiry hair, which rose from his head like a silver cloud. "Are you keeping something from me?"
"No."
"What about Spiron? What about it?"
"If Spiron is so powerful, why can't it find her?"
22 exhaled heavily and scratched at his neck. It was unlike him to calculate a response, but his pause seemed to imply that that was exactly what he was doing. He turned on his heels and walked towards the exit. "Don't walk away from me." The cold authority Banks deployed caused 22 to stop. "If you find anything, you will tell me immediately." 22's shoulders fell beneath his coat. He turned to face Banks. The sharp lines to his face softened and his eyes began to mellow. They pleaded for understanding, but Banks needed more.
"Make it find Zara now, or I will switch it off!"
22 burst with laughter. The release of tension swung the initiative to his favor. Banks was left seething.
"Spiron is not a computer. You cannot just switch it off. Whatever it is, super robot, algorithm, I don't care. If it doesn't do what we want it to do, it is of little use to us. Since Genesis, it has free will. It does not take orders. You ordered it to help me with Red Band and Mamadou. I did no such thing. Spiron heard your phone call and acted accordingly. I did nothing." "Bullshit!" "Spiron has its own ways. It has grown beyond anything we ever anticipated, Philip." "Are you expecting me to believe that?" "Qui genus humanum ingenio superavit." They stood, glaring at one another. Banks replied, "Non enim vos estis qui insanitis." 22 snorted dismissively, then lowered his voice. "I will grant you this. Zara is in no danger. But at least you know why you cannot find her." "Why?"
"Because Spiron doesn't want you to find her." Scene 8. Professor Perfidious and the Lord's Pulse. Despite Pablo's incredible cigar collection and Philoboda's pleasant weather, Lord Martin found the uprising tedious, and so returned to England. A week later, it was morning time, and President Xiaoping was expected to make a formal visit to Wadstone Manor with his wife and the usual phalanx of security. He had been making more positive overtones of recent, especially as the date for Operation Global Reset was approaching. The Lord caught his reflection in the bookcase. Large bags hung from his eyes. He felt his age. He had of recent struggled to find things to inspire him to live. However, fearing death, he injected himself with 20 mils of testosterone. His body was soon running wild with animal spirits. Banks had been called in for a meeting, and sat at the great oak table opposite the Lord's brother Sheridan, who had been wheeled out of refrigeration. He was still brooding over Premier Xiaoping.
"I tell you, Philip, he shall not be welcome aboard Prasutagus."
"What is Prasutagus, my lord?"
Never mind. I shall teach this Chinaman a lesson."
Banks couldn't keep his eyes off Sheridan. The shoulders to his black velvet jacket were smutted with ancient dust, and his fingers were grey like the dead branch of a tree. His expression of sly amusement remained fixed, as if caught in the midst of airing some highly sophisticated witticism. An expression he had maintained since the late 19th century, thanks to the wonders of taxidermy and glass eyeballs.
"Quite the card,"
reflected Lord Martin, clamping a loving hand on the shoulder of his elder brother.
"Miss you."
He tapped on his shoulder. It felt like a sack of wet cement. Professor Boynton Perfidious popped his head up above the table momentarily.
"Miss who?"
He was on his knees, unfurling the Lord's shirt cuff.
"Now, Boynton, stop fussing, or you will not come aboard Prasutagus either."
"I have no intention." Lord sneered at his physician, bitter at his lack of respect.
"Do you have children, Boynton? He's never married, you know."
"If I were not so busy looking after you, I might have had the opportunity."
"You know how many grandchildren have I? How many great-great-great-great-grandchildren? Thousands! Did you hear that, Boynton? Thousands!"
The professor dabbed the Lord's arm with an alcoholic cleansing agent. He was not listening.
"Oh, do stand still, please."
The professor began massaging the Lord's wrist. "I'm having trouble registering your pulse."
"Oh, stop nannying."
"Fancy a pastry, Philip?" exclaimed the professor, wagging his finger.
"Oh, honestly, just one measly mouthful."
"No, no, no." The professor stood and placed himself between the Lord and the pastries.
"But I have had a coffee."
"And only one shot per day."
"Too much."
The Lord stomped the wooden floorboards, causing dust to flume from its joints.
"One,"
reasserted the professor. Lord Martin flicked the professor's necktie into his nose. The professor grasped the Lord's shirt and yanked it from his waistband.
"One,"
he reiterated, eyes stretched wide open. At 6'7", the Lord towered over him.
"Why, you weaselly little man!"
Lord Martin snatched out for the professor's neck, but found air. The professor hastened to the other side of the table. The Lord gave chase. As they circled, Banks sat quietly, detached from the drama, as though he were not present. The professor seized a large brown leather book that lay on the table before Sheridan, causing the Lord to halt abruptly.
"Now, Boynton."
The professor's eyes sparkled as he opened the book. Its spine creaked, further incensing the Lord, who warned, "You wouldn't dare." "Oh, wouldn't I?" The professor pincered a page of the ancient wrinkled parchment between thumb and forefinger. "As Philip is my witness, I will kill you, Boynton, slowly and with the instruments." "Since it is I who keep you alive, I seriously doubt that." "I will have you replaced." "I think not." "Then you are a fool. Take that back." "I will not take it back, never." "As your physician, your surgeon, your doctor, your creator, you Frankenstein. George, your heart." "Don't you dare call me George." "Lord Martin to you, you scurrilous infected piece of vermin, you deviant, you waspish little mosquito, you. The professor mimed tearing a page from the book, which caused the Lord's testicles to contract. His intestines squeezed like a flannel, twisted in the hands of a large Russian spinster.
Do you have any idea what it took me to obtain that book?
The professor read the book's cover. In gold script it read, Michelangelo di Lodovico Buonarroti Simoni.
That book is priceless, I tell you. Philip, tell him.
Since you have all the money in the world,
Money cannot replace it, O nincompoop. It is of historical importance. It is the only handwritten autobiography of Michelangelo in existence. To lose it would be on a par with the burning the books of Alexandria, the destruction of Tenochtitlan.
I need to take your pulse. Now will you behave?
I will not. Not until you have put that book down.
Then I will have to...
You will do as you are told. Put that book down. Do you hear me?
Not until you have calmed down. Lord Martin snatched the professor's black medical bag, which lay on the table near to him. He wrenched it open and removed from it a snake-like instrument of black rubber hose and silver appendage.
Your stethoscope, I presume.
What are you doing? The Lord stretched and yanked and generally tested it for elasticity, before throwing it to the floor and grinding his shoe upon it.
There!
You! In retaliation, the professor tore a page from the book, scrunched it up into a ball, and threw it across the table at the Lord. Shaking with rage, the Lord upended the professor's black bag and shook its contents to the floor and stamped on them. There came a tiny rap at the door. Both men froze. Banks looked at the Lord and wondered how such a man could own and control so much of the world. The door handle twisted, and its great oak mass swung open. There, in the doorway, stood Maid, a fresh-faced 20-year-old with eyes as lovely as a summer's day. "Sorry to disturb, my lord," she whispered. Both men stood to attention.
What is it, my dear?
Replied Lord Martin, in a soft and caring tone. Premier Li Xiaoping has just arrived.
I see. The professor here was just leaving, weren't you, Boynton?
The professor inched around the table towards the door. Then, once the maid's side was offered him some cover, he gave out his final prescriptive, "Not a single bite, do you hear me?
Get out!"
The professor and maid left. The door closed with a reassuring thud. In the silence that followed, the fresh aroma of just-cooked croissant, pecan pie, and Dutch cornet filled the air. The Lord's mouth gushed with juices. He waddled over to his cocktail cabinet and lifted a delicate china cup with his bulky, fat fingers. "Now, Philip, a pastry?" "No, thank you, my lord." Without pause or consideration for the noise he was making, and in spite of his recent heart attack, the Lord consumed the entire plate, then patted his stomach.
"I will save some for you next time, Sheridan."
No sooner had he finished than the tremors of self-loathing began.
"Will you excuse me, Philip?"
The Lord stepped into his private loo, which was attached to the meeting room. Banks sat in silence, as the sound of the Lord regurgitating violently resounded through the wooden door. There was a flush and some running water, and then the Lord reappeared.
"You know, when you are my age, pastries are one of the few pleasures you can rely on. Now, to see to that Chinese bounder."
Sheridan was wheeled back into the refrigerator, and debris from the professor's bag and Michelangelo's book were cleared away. Tin Eye entered, with 4 tall Chinese security who ran handheld devices over, around, and beneath all tables, chairs, and furniture. Once they had left, Tinai made his own evaluation of the situation, and having offered his nod of approval, stepped back outside. The Lord prepared himself for meeting Premier Li Xiaoping. It was to be their last meeting before global reset.